Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. Parents can send instant money transfers, automate allowance, and more. Plus, keep an eye on spending with real-time notifications. Join more than 6 million parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get your first month free at greenlight.com/ACAST. That's greenlight.com/ACAST.
Since 2013, Bombas has donated over 100 million socks, underwear, and T-shirts to those facing homelessness. If we counted those on air, this ad would last over 1,157 days. But if we counted the time it takes to make a donation possible, it would take just a few clicks. Because every time you make a purchase, Bombas donates an item to someone who needs it.
Go to bombas.com/ACAST and use code ACAST for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/ACAST, code ACAST.
I'm Sandra, and I'm just the professional your small business was looking for. But you didn't hire me because you didn't use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has professionals you can't find anywhere else, including those who aren't actively looking for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role, like me.
In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you'll miss out on great candidates like Sandra. Start hiring professionals like a professional. Post your free job on linkedin.com/spoken today.
Pursuing your future doesn't end at 40. In fact, it may mark the beginning of knowing who you are, what you're capable of, and what you really want. But knowing what's next and how to get there can be a challenge, especially when old narratives play on repeat. Liberty Road is here to share stories so that you can consider your possibilities, pursue your purpose, and move into your future with intention. I'm your host, Netta Jones, and we're here to listen, learn, and liberate dreams, one episode at a time. Well, hello, Liberty listeners. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Road. Today, I get to interview somebody that I went to high school with, and I'm so excited to hear how her life has brought her to this point in the creation of something that she's going to share with you. For now, I just want to introduce her, Lori Gigantelli. Welcome to the show. It's so nice to be with you.
Well, thank you, Netta. I'm so excited that you reached out. When I opened up the message from you and I was like, oh my goodness.
As I said to you, I'm never on Facebook. I happened to be on Facebook and I saw that you were launching something. And I wanted to tell this story because so many of the wonderful women that we bring on the podcast are on the other side. They have already had their success. You are building up to that success. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get that story so that our listeners could get inspired by what you're doing and see themselves in what you're doing, that it feels a little closer to home. So why don't you first tell us what it is that you're doing?
Okay. So our company that we have started, and it is my daughter and I that have started this company, it is called Mix Eve. And it is an overnight chia pudding and oatmeal chia blends company. We are trying to get chia seeds into everybody's pantry just as conveniently and easy to use as your oatmeal packets. So if you think of the little oatmeal packets that you tear off and you can mix really quick when you're in a hurry, we're basically doing that in the form of putting all these kind of interesting chia pudding recipes and getting them into packets so they can be mixed up the night before and ready to go in the morning.
And what is the value of chia? We hear about it all the time. We know that it's good for us. We know that it's come a long way since the little Chia Pet days in the 80s. Mm-hmm. What is it now that we know that makes it so important to our diets?
Well, for one thing, that's a big question in the sense that chia seeds are wonderful because they do have a lot of fiber in them. So quite honestly, if you even take the chia seed and you compare it to oats ounce for ounce, they're quite similar in terms of the fact that, you know, the energy that it's going to provide. The difference is the chia seed has about 10 grams of fiber and oatmeal is about 3 grams of fiber. Chia seeds also provide omega-3 fatty acids, which is the good type of fat that we try to get in our diet. And fat, just like protein, can provide a sense of satiety, that feeling of fullness. So you get a little bit of the really good fats coming in, in a plant form, you get equal amounts of protein that oats would provide. So they're equal in that way. But if you're looking for something that maybe is not quite as, sometimes I think we like things that are really carbohydratey and starchy, and that feels good to eat some days, because I think we need that some days. And other days, maybe we don't want something quite that heavy. And that's where the chia seed has more fiber and not quite so much of the carbohydrate. So it's not that one is better than the other, but it is equally as good of an option when you look at, like, gosh, oatmeal is like kind of a great way to start the day. Chia seeds are a great way to start the day. And actually, it's really funny that you saw that Facebook post, because I know what you're talking about. That slipped on there by accident. And after it went, I was like, ooh, I wasn't quite ready for that to go out yet. I mean, we really just hadn't started unrolling stuff. And then it went out. And before I really realized it, it got so many likes. I was like, oh, well, I'll leave it there. So I find it really interesting that you saw it and invited us to be, or me to be on the show representing Mixie. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad I saw it. It was a happy accident. I'm sure other people have said that they were excited to see what you were up to too. So tell us about how you and your daughter, Alina, who's 19, who's a college student, how did you guys come up with this idea?
Well, it's probably a story that goes back very far. And let me just back up a little bit. So my background is in nutrition. I'm actually a registered dietitian. I worked early on in my career, and then I stayed home and raised 4 children. And my kids will all tell you, nutrition was a big foundation and an important part of their growing up. They heard a lot about it. As they were growing up and I was raising them, I always tried to keep my pulse on nutrition. I didn't work full time, but I was either doing something in the volunteer realm that somehow touched with children. I did a few different projects that involved children. I tried to get my hands on some counseling and did small counseling or contract work while they were growing up, more when they got a little bit older, but kind of always kept my pulse on nutrition, cooking, food, creating wholesome meals. And all of that, for the most part, took place in the Midwest, which is where we raised our children. Whether it was unfortunate or fortunately, we had a change right as our youngest daughter was going to be in her second year of high school. We had a situation that caused us to uproot, and we were moving to West Virginia from the Midwest. So we got there, and no sooner after we moved, our daughter is starting this new high school, the pandemic hits. And now her and I are home a lot together. We don't have a huge community of people. And we're spending all this time together. Well, it was great because her and I connect on a lot of things, and food and kind of preparing foods was one area that we always had. And she always kind of enjoyed playing around in the kitchen and making things. And she's the one that actually kind of came up and started seeing, I think, really on the internet, all these chia pudding recipes. So she's the one that kind of introduced me to that. Now, I had been eating chia seeds for a long time, but not like that. I actually found these bars that were my fix between meals or fueling for running, etc. But I had not eaten the chia seed in chia pudding. And so we started playing around with these recipes. We were always like cooking and doing things. And then we were talking about it one day and it was like, gosh, this is really neat, but it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of ingredients. It's not that super easy to make in the morning, and you kind of got to think ahead on it. And so we came up with some recipes, and we were like, gosh, we could actually, if we could get this in packaging, wouldn't it be kind of neat to have a new product out there that was just as easy as oatmeal, that would just give people an option? And the one advantage with chia is, unlike the morning with oatmeal where you actually have to cook it, the chia seeds can be poured in a container. We actually shake them. We put them in a container with a lid. We put our milk or milk alternative in, because that's what you mix it with, and you shake it and you put it in the refrigerator. Actually, we shake it, we let it sit for 10 or 15 minutes because the chia seeds, they begin to gel and pick up water and fluid. And then you kind of got to shake them again so they don't all stick together. And then you put it in the refrigerator. So in the morning, it's quick to go. It's right there. So that was the beginning of it. And that was in West Virginia. That was in 2021-ish that started. And then we had another move and a whole bunch of changes that kind of had to pause it for a bit. Alina was actually going off to college and we were moving again. And so I put everything on pause, got us settled in Virginia. Alina was back at school in Ohio. And I said, are we going to do this? Like, we talked about it. You're now in business school. She's actually got a co-major with entrepreneurship as part of her co-major.
Perfect.
And I'm like, are we going to do this? And so I started looking around Virginia. We had started with Small Business Development Center in West Virginia just to get, I don't know business. I did not know business, to get some insight. And I came here and they had the Small Business Development. So I started there. And then I learned that here in Charlottesville, Virginia, there is another organization called Community Investment Collaborative, and it's a nonprofit and offers small businesses, particularly those that are women and minority, but they are, I believe, open to all. They offer a 16-week course in entrepreneurship. And so you had to apply for it. And I thought, well, I'm going to apply and see if I get in. And they were saying it was like 20 hours of homework a week and class commitments and all of this. So I got into it.
Did you find yourself enjoying, as somebody who had studied nutrition, as somebody who had kept her finger on the pulse of all of that, this is a very different trajectory for you. Did you find yourself enjoying it? Were you surprised by what you connected with in the classes?
Well, I was surprised. I was really happy to have the instruction on these areas because I knew I didn't know anything about them. And I knew I had a lot of voids that I had to go out and figure out, how am I going to learn this piece? How am I going to understand branding? How am I going to understand tax forms and paperwork? How am I going to figure out packaging? How do we figure out a website? Where do we go for our customers? So there was all these pieces that we were all of a sudden now broadening out and talking about. And one of the things that we did during that time is customer surveys. And we were encouraged during this class to pick a target population, a target market. And originally we were thinking, gosh, it was kind of that fitness world. I mean, that athlete. My daughter was a dancer. I have ran my whole life. That was actually who got our first samples, was in West Virginia. I was in a couple running groups and I would hand out my samples to them and ask them to taste them. And we put QR codes on our samples that went back to a survey.
Oh, nice.
And then people could give us feedback. And so we kind of made some modifications based on some of the feedback we were getting. So that was when we were testing things out and seeing what is it that stuck with people, what were other people kind of saying, you know. When we got into the class and I started thinking about it, our target market kind of shifted a little bit because Alina and I started seeing things from her vantage point of being in college. And the dorm rooms that she was in, first and second year, actually, first year in a dorm, second year in kind of a sorority dorm, they only had refrigerators. And, you know, she was like many girls are hitting Starbucks and grabbing stuff on the go. And we were like, gosh, this can be prepared in a dorm. This is easy. All you've got to have is milk, almond milk, soy milk, something to mix it with in your refrigerator. And this can be like grab and go, or that afternoon snack when you just need a little like in between because dinner's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And so that's what we decided to do. So we reached out to a bunch of college students in a whole variety of states and just kind of started finding out, do they even know what chia pudding is? Because it is still kind of a new product that's out there.
It is. Yeah. You're right about the social media piece of it, where she was starting to see these recipes, that you're seeing it there. So it seems like even though it's a great market for them, a lot of them still don't know about it. There's a lot of opportunity there. And I would say even going beyond college into those early years, you're still living that grab and go life, right?
Yes.
So that can be where you catch them and then they can grow with the brand.
And even just as we were kind of from our time in West Virginia to even us arriving here, there was a few things where I was like, gosh, this really is picking up a little inertia with this chia pudding. I had ended up flying through Dallas, I think it was. And this was a few years back, but that was the first time I saw kiosks in the airport that had ready mixed chia pudding. And I thought, I got to try this. Like, how can this be good? Yeah. And I was so surprised that it actually tasted good and it felt like a healthy option. It just tasted like when you're in the airport, it's hard to find something that kind of, if you're wanting to eat healthy, it's hard sometimes to find something. So first we saw that. Then actually when we arrived in Virginia, with the University of Virginia being right here in Charlottesville, there's a lot of coffee houses and student food places around campus. And we walked into a coffee shop there right after we got here, and they were selling chia pudding ready-made. And I'm like, this really is coming out. Like, people are enjoying this.
Yeah.
It's still in education, because I know when I was doing this course, some people didn't know what chia pudding is. So not only are we like, here's what mixed Eve is, but let's back up. Do you know what chia pudding is?
Yeah.
And so we'd start there and just explaining what it is. And, you know, going back to the health benefits too of chia pudding, the other nice piece of it is, because those chia seeds absorb fluid, it also brings fluid in. So you're getting fiber with fluid coming together, which is a perfect match of what you want. So
it strikes me as you're talking about your work, it may be in this 12-week course, but you've been very deliberate about doing your homework, the QR code as people were tasting things, really understanding that it's easy for people to say, oh, everybody should have chia pudding, but to really hone in on what is our target, how will that influence our messaging, how will that influence the branding that we put on the label, who are we trying to attract? If you're trying to attract a runner, it's very different than a college student. And all of that intentionality, all of that really thoughtful, we have to educate them on the value of chia, or even tell them what it is. What is chia pudding? Is so smart. Did you know that you were going to have to do that sort of work, that was going to be a part of introducing Mixed Eve to your potential buyers?
Well, I think maybe I did have a little angle into this, just because in doing counseling, so much of my counseling when I was working with people was on issues of trying to make the body healthier. A lot of the people I work with tend to be in that middle age range. And that's when weight, if you have issues of weight, really are starting to creep up. And then all the disease states that kind of come to play because you're not taking care of your body. And when you sit down and you start really talking to people and finding out, you know, what is their routine like? What is their food situation like at home? Where do they get their groceries? Where do they eat? What is their work environment? What affects the choices that we make and the foods that they have, that they're taking during the day? And so many times I get to the end of kind of these interviews with people and I'll be like, it's dinner time before anybody is even taking a fruit or a vegetable or has access to it. And so to kind of go back to what you were saying, I knew that like we kind of had to go out and see what is it that people are doing, but I also kind of want to nudge people a little bit too, to consider how can you do things a little differently. So with our chia recipes, we actually have blended them with fruit and vegetable powders. So we have a beet chia pudding. It is thinking outside the box. When you first tell somebody, it's like, I'm going to eat beets in the morning, but it actually adds a very earthy, very pleasant flavor to it. And so it's almost like going back to the person when you're working one-on-one with somebody, it's like coaching society now. It's like, we know Americans have problems with our food. We have problems with the food that we have access to. We have problems of just companies that make foods for taste that are almost addictive, that you can't stop eating them. And it's like, we wanted to put a product out there that tasted good and that you feel good about eating, but doesn't fall into that bracket. And through this, we do want to message, like, there are options out there, and there's more and more coming out that I think in this category of food that isn't just your big box companies putting out things with huge R&D into how can we make this taste so you can't just eat one.
You just can't eat.
You have to keep going back. In a sense, we kind of want to coach our customers into looking not just at our product, but looking at how our product might be a little nudge, a little message, a little encouragement to say, gosh, you got a little beet in at breakfast, or there was carrot in that chia pudding you just ate. How can you add to it the rest of the day?
Yeah, it's sort of like you're starting off on such a good foot, you don't want to screw it up throughout the day, right? There's that, a little bit of that mentality.
There's a little bit of that.
Yeah. I appreciate seeing in so many of the stories we hear from women, but when you can start to see a through line. So you've never been an entrepreneur, but clearly what you're doing harkens back to the work that you studied and the work that you did and the work that you loved and the work that you continued to do, even though it was in the home. You weren't doing it for money. You were doing it in the home and in your nonprofit volunteer work. The through line is it's still very Lori and what's important to Lori, and you brought it in. And maybe the work that you did with your daughter sort of elevated, like all of a sudden, like, let's really take this to the next level. There was new energy around it and a new way of thinking about it. Was that part of the goal, or was that a happy accident?
Well, I think it was a discovery. Like you said, this maybe is like the crux for all people that are in this stage in life. To a certain extent, you've done enough things, whatever those are. You've done enough things to have some history to see what you've done, and yet you still have future to look forward to build upon. With a little bit of creativity and knowing, like, I like this, it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, I've built other things in life. Let's just figure out how to build this. So in a sense, maybe everybody has a little bit of entrepreneurial in them. It's just, how do you extract that? How do you kind of tap into something that you say, I've painted walls my whole life. I'm a painter. And I've brought color into people's homes, and I've helped with interior decorating. And then take that and say, now what can I do with that going forward? Being a little creative with yourself to tap into, where do you see this thread of consistency or a theme in your life? And maybe that's the stage I'm at, is like, there's been a theme from way back, even before I went to college, that I can tap into, and I see it. My kids tell me about it. And now I've got a daughter we kind of share these interests, and she's kind of got the forward trajectory. She's on a university campus. Well, that's key. Yeah. That's a great asset to have right now in bringing our ideas together.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's kind of looking to see, what are your resources? Because everybody's got different resources that they can tap into. At least the way I see being an entrepreneur at this stage, very early, very youthful stage, it's looking to see what it is that you can bring forward and then say, okay, now how am I going to take this? Now I've got a lot to learn, but I've got to map it out. And I've got to figure out the pieces I think I know, the ones that I need to develop more, and I need to go out and even figure out what I still need to learn, because I don't even know what's still lurking out there, and figure that piece out. So I think that's the stage we're at. Lots of discovery.
Yeah. I like that the way you're saying it doesn't sound, even though I'm sure there are days that there's a little fear in there, but it sounds more like an adventure. You're embracing it and unpacking it for all the opportunity of not just growing the company, but growing yourself, right? And that approach to me is kind of where the magic can happen, because you're motivated by what is possible, by what's out there versus a limiting belief that you put on yourself. I'm not an entrepreneur. I've never done this before. I don't know much about business. And being suppressed to some degree by fear, you've actually embraced all of it. And I love hearing that. And I think it's going to inspire so many people who are hearing your story.
Well, and I think, you know, too, maybe perhaps because I've moved a lot, you know, you get to a new community and you've got to build it all over again. You've got to build your community. You have nothing. You enter a new place and you have no friends. You don't even recognize people in the grocery store. You don't have a hairdresser. You don't have a dentist. Your doctor doesn't know you. You've got to build all these relationships all over again. And I kind of thought about this as we've been building this, because I'm like, this is kind of like moving too. We're just starting with a blank slate, and we've got to build our team. We've got to build our customer. I'm getting a lot of coaching right now. So what are these coaching veins that I need to develop so I can understand how the finances go, or I can understand how sales are going to go, or how we're going to get out into a community that we don't know. And in doing all of that, I'm now building like this community for myself too, and my daughter that we're going to coexist in. And that's kind of exciting to me because we're building a network of people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love this story so much. So much of what you said builds a case for something that we at Liberty Road have been talking about. And even last night, we had a Liberty Road dinner, and Susan Feldman was our special guest. And in my interview with her, she said almost exactly what you just said about this idea of building on what you know, building on what you have. She said, I have a problem with the word reinvention because it seems to like be out with the old, in with something new. It puts all this pressure on starting over. She's like, what's wrong with the past me? What's wrong with all the years of experience I have and all that I bring to the table? And I think she's absolutely right. And I don't want to get caught up in semantics. I know that so many people, when they say reinvent, they don't mean letting go of everything that you once were. But there is so much opportunity to build on and to see the work that you've done and the things that used to sort of make you tick, see them in a new way, see them in a new light. I myself was coaching small business women for years. I was kind of the startup consultant for a lot of years. And when I started to hear my clients say things like, I think I'm getting too old. I think I need to let go of that dream. I think it's time to hang that up. Technology gap is getting to be a little too wide. I have no idea what's going on out there. I was like, wait a minute, we have to have a conversation about starting something relative to age, because that's what I was seeing. But I was still working with women. I was still taking the years of what I used to do and just shedding a new light and a new angle on things. And I think exactly what you said is so important. Like, what do you bring to the table? And it's also why I find this midlife season so magical, because we have so many contacts, so many resources, so much experience, so much life wisdom. Why wouldn't we take all that and shape something new for ourselves? Love it.
And you actually mentioned something too, that technology gap. Another reason to just try something new, try something different, because we can get so complacent and we can get so kind of like we know everything because that's what we've done for the last 10 years or 20 years. This is the way we've done it. And all of a sudden, if that just gets removed and it's like, you can't do that anymore. You're not doing that anymore. It's like, oh, okay. So you shift a little and you figure out what's next. But sometimes when you have to start learning things, you really have to start learning them. And the technology one is one I look in the eye a lot and think, gosh, we have to stay up on this, because if the world is moving so fast, if you don't stay up on some of this, you're going to fall so far behind that I think it's kind of frightening. And so I like always having a project of some sort, because somehow I'm always learning something. Quite honestly, before we got on this today, I was working with a different type of headsets than I know you all usually use. And I had tested mine and it worked great. And I went to get on and it would not connect, and it wouldn't connect.
Of course.
And, so I am Googling hacks and what the instructions are. I try calling the company. They don't pick up. It took 20 minutes and I finally did have it connect. But it's like, these are like real things that happen every day.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't been on this podcast today, I would have never had that experience, and I wouldn't have to troubleshoot it, and I wouldn't have to learn from it, and I wouldn't have had to discover something. And so I think when you try something new, and especially something where you're trying to create and build something, there's all these opportunities for growth, and not just personal growth with people, but an understanding for yourself, but also just like, I've got to learn something. I've got to learn a new piece to something. And I think that can be really scary, and it is sometimes. It keeps me up at night, many nights. But it also is what gives me gratification, and I got to keep going at this.
Yeah.
I just got to keep pushing it forward. And it does help to be working in a 2-generational field with this product too. I think that is very refreshing for somebody my age to have somebody like my daughter who's in a college university coming with her ideas. And we do lots of calls, lots of video chat, lots of sharing of emails to problem solve. Like, what should we do? How should we do this? What do you think? Are we doing this in the right direction? So that kind of brings us together too. And she's not the only woman I'm working with. We are working with 2 other women too. One is in Omaha, Nebraska, and one is in Washington, D.C., working on MIXEVE.
I love this story of a mother-daughter. How do you guys divide and conquer in terms of your roles, your professional roles within the business? And then there's this other weird thing of you're the mother sending a daughter off to college and you're like, but also pay attention to your schoolwork while we're busy. So there's that funny tension. Mm-hmm. How have you guys done that to keep it going and keep it healthy and keep it sustainable? Because again, there's a relationship here as well.
I think a lot of it for her right now, I keep telling her, you work on your classes and you're my advisor right now. Mm-hmm. And advisor, and eventually like kind of working on some of the just design ideas. Mm-hmm. Now she's going to be home here in a week and we've got a whole bunch of meetings that we're going to jointly, and there's going to be more product development and some of that she's going to be involved in. But while she was in school, it was mostly from the consulting end of like, let's just work on these topics together. So it's mostly me sending little agenda items and saying, read this, let's talk about it, that kind of thing.
That's probably a great way for her to feel involved, but also tethered in a good way, mm-hmm. but also have the freedom to be like, okay, I can focus on my studies and my mom's not making big decisions without me. She's checking in with me constantly, but she's keeping the ball rolling.
Yes. And she has just recently had a couple professors actually reach out to her. I don't know whether they saw her resume or how they heard about it, because I can't imagine she's running around telling people about this, because that wouldn't really be her. Yeah. But they have come to her and said, you know, we understand that you are a co-owner in this and you've got a LLC. And we are here to help you. And so if you have questions or you need guidance, we're here to help you. So I think we're going to have some conversations about that, because really a lot of development sometimes happens through kind of being in a university setting. And there is always teaching opportunities too. I mean, quite honestly, even this program that I just went through, I was telling you, through the Community Investment Collaborative, after you finish the 16 weeks, they offer coaching. And so I've been taking advantage of a lot of their coaching. Well, one of the programs was a law clinic for entrepreneurs. And I looked at it when it kind of came into my email, I think, and I went to the website and I read about it, and it was like, okay, it was going to be the University of Virginia attorneys, and they were going to work with students, and they were looking for entrepreneurs that were just starting out that maybe had some legal issues. And you had to apply and tell them what you needed from legal that they might be able to help you with. Now, you know, you're thinking these students are trying to learn from you, but I'm like, ooh, we actually have a really interesting situation, because when we started our LLC in West Virginia, and then we came here and I opened another LLC in Virginia, I didn't close down West Virginia, because when we started in West Virginia, we had applied for a trademark for our name. Well, the trademark went through stage 1. Then you had to put product into commerce, which we did. And then it's waiting approval of the second level of the trademark process. And so the attorney that I worked with there is like, don't shut down this LLC yet until the trademark goes through. At least that's what he was advising me to do. But I was like, oh, this is getting really complicated. So I presented these questions. So this law clinic, there was a professor that oversaw it, and they assigned me 2 law students from the University of Virginia. Nicest people. I got a young man and a woman, and the man was in his 3rd year of law school. Both of them had worked too in business prior to coming back to law school. And they were just great to work with. And ironically, he told me his parents were both oncologists that believed in nutrition, that they had better outcome. I think they were actually oncology surgeons. And he said, my parents really believed that like when somebody's in good health and takes care of themselves and then they go through this process, they have better outcomes. And then the girl that was assigned to me. Now, I think they kind of got choice in their selection of what projects they took on because they had several different projects to choose from. Her mother was a dietitian. And so she kind of came from that angle. So anyways, but they walked us through a whole bunch of things and helping us get just certain pieces set up, legal documents that we didn't have just for establishing our LLC, and walked us through like, here's how you will go about shifting from West Virginia to Virginia. So it was a really neat opportunity, I think, both for the student and definitely for us, a learning experience. And again, these are pieces that like build community. These are resources that were out there where we're helping them learn and they're helping us build something. And it came out of this nonprofit organization that was here in Virginia. So we've been very thankful for the people that we've gotten to work with here.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've sought out some really awesome opportunities. I mean, I want our listeners to hear, like, look in your local state, look and see what's available to you. We know that SCORE is available in many states, that's an established organization.
Yes.
And I would say sometimes it could be the individual that you're given to work with isn't the person for you. So keep trying. It's not that the organization itself doesn't have good resources available.
Right.
I love this idea of going to a university and seeing what's available because they want to workshop real things. They want to bring, whether it's professors or student attorney, almost attorneys, wannabe attorneys, but people who want to workshop these real life things and for their own benefit to try things out and test it out and see if this is the direction they want to go. But for you, it's an extra set of hands and legs and people who can actually move the needle for you and help you to take whatever to the next step. So smart. So smart.
Actually, even in West Virginia, when we first came up with this idea, the university in Huntington, which is called Marshall University, has an incubator lab, or I forget exactly what they call it. It's like an inventors convention or whatever, and they were giving awards. You could apply and see if you would win one of their awards, and then there was like either a dollar value or you got services or whatever. So Alina and I, but it was mostly Alina, applied for this grant or whatever through them, and I actually won. They filmed a podcast for us. They brought us down there. They wanted to learn about our product. They helped us with some of our initial packaging. We got a lot of entrepreneurial, like, how do we start this? How do we go with this? Walkthrough from the very beginning because of that award. Again, it was something on a university campus that was open to anybody to apply. Yeah. And I think a lot of universities across the United States have incubators or like startup areas or people that are coming up with ideas. So those are kind of areas to look for too, to tap into. If you've got an idea and you want to see what's out there, you can kind of just look on their website and see what they're offering. Sometimes they have workshops or things that you can get involved in that can help get you started.
There are more entrepreneurial resources now than there ever have been. And I think the hard part for those who are starting out is to identify which ones to vet, the ones that are best for you. I love in hearing you unpack your own story. There's something about your approach. It was, I don't know what I'm doing here, so I'm going to learn how to do this. And I think that was probably what helped you uncover all of these opportunities. Some of us, I'm guilty of this for sure. It's a little bit like, I got it, I'll figure it out. And we don't take advantage of those things. And I think you've done it the right way in saying like, okay, even if you do know a lot of the things that you were learning, like, I know this part of it, I know this part of it. Going in and being completely open, even if you think you know what you're doing, I think that's where you're going to amass the most information, to be sure, but also where you can rethink how you've approached something. Or maybe oh, I want to do this sort of sales, or I want the packaging to look like this, or what. But it's when you have other people asking you these questions, coming from a much more objective point of view, where you're like, oh, I hadn't considered that. I hadn't thought of it that way. What I really appreciate about your approach is that you've gone in willing to embrace all of it. And I think all these doors have opened as a result of your sort of mindset toward this.
Yeah. And, actually along those lines, on days when I'm kind of like, oh, can we do this? can we do this? I always sit back and go, you know what? I can push it forward just a little further. I know I've got things on my to-do list that need to be done, and I know how to do those, or I know where to get answers to those. And I can push that forward a little bit. And even in the end, I sit there and go, if this really just doesn't take off, we are all learning something in the process. My daughter is learning and understanding what it is like to begin a startup from an LLC, and the steps that have to be gone through, and the discussions that we've had, and the creativity that we've put into it, and all the things that have been learning experiences for us, and the people that we've met. Yeah. And that is a win right there. And so as long as we can keep everything in the order that we have it and just kind of keep inching it forward, then I'm like, we're making progress. And I was thinking the whole idea of starting an LLC, comparing it to like taking care of yourself and your own wellness. It's not a fad diet. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes determination. It takes consistency. It takes boredom. It takes doing it when you don't want to do it. Being creative to kind of spark a new idea and keep it moving forward. What does it take to keep ourselves healthy? And I don't just mean from a physical or nutritional perspective, but happy, balanced life, keeping our family fed and nourished and doing the things they need to do. It's all this balance of things. None of that just happens easily. It's something that takes little bits of movement forward. And I'm like, okay, I think we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you're approaching it, and your words right now, almost, it's a way of caring for yourself. It's a way of expanding yourself, of utilizing your curiosity, of pushing yourself when you're bored. Those are all things that we require of ourselves when we're younger. For you to take that same approach at this stage in life, it is actually a way for you to care for Lori and Lori's future. Yes, we know it's a way for you to help to grow your daughter and her experience, and this is going to be with her for the rest of her life, right? It will be so grounding and so foundational for her. But for you, I find it to be, well, this podcast wouldn't exist if I didn't think that we should be looking at things in a new way and starting new things. And they don't have to be for-profit businesses. They can be nonprofit. They can be writing a book. They can be, there's so many things that I think we have inside of us that we want to birth. And I find it interesting that for many of us, as we become empty nesters, we find those things again. Like we come
Everybody's
back to
got a good idea in them, right? Everybody's got a good idea.
Yeah.
It's just they come from, and sometimes those really good ideas seem odd. Who would think to do that? And that was kind of like our, putting beets with chia. But it seems like, why would you combine these two ingredients? But why would you not?
Yeah.
Until you try it.
Yeah. I love the approach. So much of what you've said, I don't even have to ask any questions. I'm looking through and I'm like, she's answered that. She's answered that. You're really giving us so much of what it means to look at this season of life, to be curious about what's possible, look at that through line and build it, take it to the next level, and talked about the benefit of doing that for ourselves, for our mental health, for our kind of emotional health. Do you think that approach is because you yourself are in midlife and you have some wisdom in the way you're approaching this?
I don't know. I think a lot of it is just some creativity piece that has always been there in this realm of nutrition too, in working with people and seeing how frustrated individuals can be when they're just trying to get themselves healthier and out of solutions or feel like they've tried everything. It's like part of me sits and looks at our culture and says, what are we doing wrong in our culture and how can we fix that? And this is one tiny product in a great big world, but it is a new product. And I really like the fact that chia seeds delivers the fiber it delivers, because Americans, I think it's like over 90% of Americans don't get the adequate fiber. And you could sit there and go, oh, okay, well, just take a fiber pill. But you know what? Fiber is important, not so much. It is important because it's fiber and it's beneficial to our body. But if you even step back and go, what sort of foods deliver fiber. They're plants, they're fruits and vegetables, they're grains. It's not just about popping the fiber. It's about eating from that realm of food. And so I think there's maybe some little messaging that maybe I personally am hoping to wiggle out there, but it's just my way of wanting to say maybe I can still help people on a bigger level than just the one-on-one counseling, but actually putting something out there that we believe in, that we think is a good product, that works not just for a breakfast, but also as a snack, and that you can feel good about and build off of. So I think maybe that's more of what has driven me forward in this. Is I think I have a long history of just wanting to eat well and fuel well.
It seems right that impact is important to you. It seems right that this is something that feels like your purpose, right? And the fact that it's boxed in a chia pudding is that's just the vehicle, but there's so much more behind it. I'm so glad you came on to share the story of McSeve. I can't wait to see where it's going. I can't wait to try it, but I can't wait to see where it's going next, and we will be following you. So before I let you go, I want to get into our Fast Five real quick. So what is a daily practice that you do that keeps you grounded?
Well, Netta, I am a runner. And people will tell you she's got to run every day. And I do. I just really love it. And quite honestly, it was our move to West Virginia where I just met the most fabulous runners, and I had the best running groups there. And I realized then that, wow, running isn't just running. It can be this whole community of people. And so now that we're yet in another state, I'm trying to build a running community here, but running is definitely not just for the run, but for the community that it builds.
You've been running forever, a long time.
Yes.
And how far do you run, I have to ask? What's a daily run?
About 8 miles.
Okay. Wow. Okay. You're legit. And what are you currently reading?
Oh my gosh. What is the book that I'm currently reading? All the Broken Places. But I've read a whole series of really just good books. They're just novels or historical fiction lately that I've just loved. They're just probably silly escape books, but The Lilac Women, I think, and The Paris Architect. And then I like, is it Walter Isaac? He does like biographies. And I think I read Leonardo da Vinci, who was super creative and just very interesting. And then CRISPR, Jennifer Doudna. I'm not sure I'm saying her last name. She's the one that did like all the DNA, RNA research, and he did like a biography on her that was just fascinating. So I like reading some of that sometimes too. Okay. We'll make sure to connect to all of those. And because we've got you on here, we have to ask about healthy eating. Like, what's one piece of advice that you can share with our listeners, primarily women that are in that 40, 50, 60-year range who are fighting extra pounds, those perimenopausal and menopausal pounds that we associate at least with that. What's a piece of advice that you can give us? Well, again, fiber, not just because it's putting fiber in the diet, but because of the types of food that do deliver fiber. We know that fiber is really good for the gut. It helps our microbiome. Our microbiome is so important in our total health of our body. So don't just look for fiber pills or way of adding just a tablet to your diet, but look at the foods that are rich in fiber, because they're also very healthful and very useful when you're trying to maintain weight. And that's where the chia seed, quite honestly, fits really well into that, just because it does absorb so much water. It is high in fiber. It delivers omega-3 fatty acids, and it does really kind of create some feeling of satiety because it does have a balance of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. And so it can really work as kind of a between meal, like I need to get from lunch until dinner. And it can kind of give a little bit of a sense of fullness. So many benefits. Okay, well, as soon as your packages are available, we'll be hitting the store for them. And what's something in particular about this season, this midlife season of life that you're loving? That's a tricky one, because I feel like we've had a lot of change in this midlife season. And so it's kind of forced a lot of new startovers, which sometimes I'm like, oh, like, here we go again.
Not really up to this again.
It does create awareness that like life is always changing and you got to roll with it and see what's next. And I guess maybe I do like a lot of change, and I like to kind of see like, oh, what's going to happen next? Yeah. And maybe that's kind of what this stage is what's going to happen next.
Again, your openness and curiosity, we know that those are signs of longevity or pieces of the longevity puzzle. So with all that you've just shared with us, you are going to have a very long and healthy life with all of your all your moves and and your business. I love it.
I don't know about that.
And then how has launching Mix Eve in particular, how has that been liberating to you?
I was thinking about this. I think it liberated my creativity. It allowed that to come out. I think I've always had that, but sometimes you can let creativity out, but then you got to know what to do with it. And I think this has helped me be disciplined in taking that creativity and trying to put it into something that maybe is useful. So maybe creativity got liberated in maybe a useful way. Maybe there's a sense of being liberated from this sense of building new people, building new communities. Like you don't have to stay with the same that you've always known. You can change. You can let go of things that maybe you were involved in before and say, okay, I'm going to try something a little different, or I'm going to reach out to a different type of person, or I'm going to, for us, get in a different state. That's a whole nother culture sometimes. Yeah. But I guess that somewhat feels liberating because it's a step away from being complacent. And so to me, it feels like it's refreshing.
Absolutely. What a great answer. I'm so glad you liberated the creativity that was already in you, because you're bringing something for yourself, for your daughter, examples for the rest of your children, examples for other women who are listening to you right now. All of that that started with Chia pudding, all of that started with that has opened and uncovered so much for you and for the rest of us. Thank you, Lori. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Netta, for inviting me. I put podcasts on all the time. And actually, since you invited me, I've probably listened to at least 50 of them. I've listened to a whole bunch of them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you have these really successful women on here and you're inviting us in these very early stages to come on. So it's a huge honor to be on here with you. And I really have enjoyed the stories of the other women that you have had on the show. It's been educational and it's been helpful for me. So thank you.
I'm so glad. No, I really wanted to get, like I said at the top of the podcast, somebody who was in it, somebody who was right in the thick of it and could remember with detail, like, okay, we did this and then you need to do this. And this was a piece that we had to walk through. And you did exactly that. You delivered exactly that. So thank you so much.
Well, and thank you.
We're going to follow your success. We'll have you back on here in a few years and you'll be telling a different story about how Mix Eve has grown. And we'll have Alina on with you next time.
Well, that would be lovely. We will hope to be there.
Yes, you will. You will. And Liberty listeners, thank you guys for hanging out with Lori and with me. And again, we'll have everything about Mix Eve available to you guys in the show notes so that you can access it for yourself. Bye for now. Liberty Road is broadcast on all platforms: Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and more. If you like what you've heard, please follow, rate, and review Liberty Road on Apple Podcast and Spotify. It helps us to know if these episodes are inspiring and equipping you to move into your middle third with intention. Liberty Road is created by executive producer Netta Jones, supervising producer Elizabeth Wyndham, producer Julia Wyndham, and music by Jack Jones.